welcome everyone to an incredible day. Today is book launch day for this book that you're going to want to get a copy of, A New Kind of Diversity. I'm Chad Johnson. I'm so grateful to be joining with you today. And our number one desire for today is truly to add value back to you as a leader. We believe that at the end of this webinar, that statement will be true. We have people joining from all over the world. I see all of you jumping in here. Please put in the chat, say hello, say where you're from. Let us know where you're from because I know we're global here today. We got our Maxwell Leadership Certified team members, Facebook Live, I see you on here, Instagram Live, YouTube, shout out there for you in the community, and some of our Zoom global audience. Thank you guys for joining in for such a special day today. We believe that you have multiplication impact in you, and we want to help you walk away with insight as well as application. That's such a huge piece to apply what you're learning today to win at not only life, but also in your work. And so today you're going to hear from some incredible guest speakers. Dr. Tim Elmore. If you haven't heard him already, buckle up. We also have special guest Valerie Burton and none other than John C. Maxwell coming up first in just a little bit. So stay tuned. You're going to want to lean in with us on this webinar today. We're so thankful again that you're here. I do want to now pause and welcome the true man of the hour and why we are here behind this book. You're going to truly want to lean into this content. Get your notepad out, your pen out, but we're excited to dive in with none other than Tim Elmore. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Chad. Great to be with you today. Always an honor to be with you. And I am excited about this topic.
Well, the content in this book is phenomenal, but man, what a book cover, Tim. This is a, can I say sexy looking book cover? Can I say that on a webinar? Is that possible? So this is a good looking book cover.
People call me sexy all the time. I'm telling you.
Hey, and I know why. I'm being one-upped over here. So, hey, for those that don't know who Dr. Tim Elmore is, you need to, and you really do. And I mean that wholeheartedly because he's actually been mentored by none other than John C. Maxwell for 40 plus years. Yeah. That's a lot of I do, you watch.
That's right.
In you. And so you're going to hear that in how he communicates and the content he provides. But he's also one of the top 100 leadership speakers in America, ranked by Inc. magazine. He's written more than 35 books with multiple bestsellers, spoken to over 500,000 plus leaders that are represented in all streams of influence, business, universities, a lot in the athletic side. Tim has actually spoken for the San Francisco Giants, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Ohio State, Stanford, Alabama, Oklahoma, and many, many more in the university spaces, as well as the pro sport area as well. Home Depot, Coca-Cola, Chick-fil-A, all across the board. He is and I mean this, the leading expert in the world and how to lead multiple generations, which we're going to touch on today with this content. I'm so excited. And he's one of our Maxwell Leadership thought leaders. You've joined up with us with John. You guys are both dear friends. We're going to hear you guys in an interview here in just a second. I know it's such a critical relationship for you and for him. And you guys continue to add value to each other. But today, Tim, is a very special day.
Yeah.
I almost call it birthing day. I know you have two kids, so
That's true. But this was like giving birth to a child. This was this is several years in the making. Actually 2 decades in the thought process, but this was a long gestation period leading to this
absolutely.
birth. Yeah.
And so if you guys haven't already, you're going to want to get a copy of this, A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. This is for every leader out there, and that's you that's on this call today. So it is launch day, and we're excited about that. I want to share with you guys, there'll be some links put in the chat here for you to jump in with the book, to purchase it, to get involved, some value-add content as well. But please, Tim, I want to, as we're talking about this book too, and we see so many people joining all over the world. Hey, thank you guys. We see the chats. We see you guys. Hey, and one quick point to make here. If you guys have questions for Tim, we're going to do a little Q&A at the end of this webinar for you to ask your questions. Please put those in the chat so we can jump in with those. But Tim, my first question here, it's an obvious one, but why? Why this book? Why now?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit.
It's a great question. I think the real answer to that question is as I work with different companies and universities and so forth, I just found an elephant in the room. Something we all know is there, but we don't really talk about it. We just kind of pretend it's not there. So we've been talking about diversity for a long time. Ethnic diversity and gender diversity and income diversity and lots of others, actually. And those are all important conversations. But we haven't known how to talk about generational diversity. And it's just as real as races and genders. And, like flying to another country, you get off that airplane, you're going to have to work at connecting with people in China, let's say, because they have a different language, they have different customs, they have different values. Bingo. If I work with a 22-year-old and I'm 62, and I am, it's like a cross-cultural interaction. Now, I got to work at it. It's not impossible, but I got to work at it. And I think I found too many people saying, kids today. And we got to stop saying that and say, we need to say kids today. I know one high school principal. I love how she does this. She said, most high schoolers say, gotcha. She says, I say, gotcha. I'm going to catch you. So that's what we've got to do as employers, as coaches, as teachers, as moms and dads. So Chad, there's 7 different generations alive right now on Earth.
Wow.
For the first time in modern history.
Wow.
People are living longer and you guys have babies in your own house.
I know. As a Gen Xer, too. As a Gen Xer.
That's right, yeah. So the fun thing is we can have fun trying to understand each other, but we got to do the work. And this book was designed to be an encyclopedia. It's a reference book. I can read chapter 7. No wonder my kids do that. I can read chapter 4. No wonder my grandpa does that. So I think it's going to be helpful for teams to collaborate instead of collide, but also families. So I'll stop there.
It's so good. And I know that's a little bit of whet the appetite for you guys tuning in. And you're going to want to lean in and learn more here from Tim. And you'll hear from him actually talk a little bit more on some of the graphs and charts in here that I think are going to be extremely helpful for each of you. So again, I want to pause right here. And I want to tell you, go to newdiversitybook.com. That's a site, newdiversitybook.com. Our team's going to put it in the chat here. And on that site, there's actually some really, really cool bonus features on the site. One of which is an assessment, which I don't want to give that away because that's leading to my next question here. But there's also, if you buy the book, you will get a full keynote copy of your talk on a new kind of diversity.
So, video where they can watch it, share it.
Share it, put it in front of their team. Do a study around the book for each person, a mastermind or a small group with them. We'd love for you guys to do that. And so that's available. Just go to newdiversitybook.com to check all that out. But I do want to give you the second question, which talks about the assessment, because I think it's pretty cool. What a unique name too. We talk about we talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about intellectual intelligence,
IQ and EQ.
But you have developed a new a new one, which is generational quotient, generational assessment that you've created for all this. Tell us a little bit about this free resource, this generational assessment that people can use.
Sure. So you'll love what we called it, gang. We call it the GQ. You see what we did there? So it's your generational quotient. It helps you measure your fluency at connecting with different generations. So a lot of workplaces have 4, maybe even 5 generations working together, and we do think differently. We often vote differently. We talk differently. So this won't allow you to say, ooh, I'm pretty good with millennials, but not so good with Gen Z, or I'm pretty good with boomers, but not with Gen X. And so they can take the test, 41 questions, and then at the end, they'll get a free report saying you're better with this than that. And then it gives you a few steps you can take to better connect with those ones you're not as connected to.
It's great. So how well do I know the boomer generation? Let me test myself to see if I know how to engage with them appropriately and really learn how to meet them and unify us together, which is great. So you can do all that at newdiversitybook.com. Check that out. And we'll even drop the assessment in here too for a direct link in the chat. So we're incredibly excited. So we're going to jump in here, and I'm really excited about our first guest. I know you are. I've alluded to this a little bit already, but it's none other than Dr. John C. Maxwell. And recently, you guys had a sit down to talk about this content, this book, the years and legacy that you guys have together. And it's such a beautiful friendship and partnership. And I'm really excited for you and John to share this with our audience. Anything you want to say about John and setting up this time together?
I feel like I owe so much of my life and career to John. He's done more than I could even say. But whenever we get together, we laugh a little bit, we learn a little bit. And so that's what we did when we had this conversation.
Can't wait. So check it out.
John, thank you for taking a couple of minutes and sitting down with me. We have sat down together for 40 years.
40 years.
I was still finishing college when we met. You were doing like a week-long conference. I took notes like crazy. I still take notes. So I'm honored that you'd spend a couple of minutes to talk about this new book.
It's my joy. It is 40 years. It's been a great journey, hasn't it? And I would just like all your people to know, in the beginning, he wasn't very good. He just really wasn't. But my mentorship for you has just been so awesome.
It changed everything.
And I am so proud of you. Literally, we just finished speaking on a major simulcast.
Yeah.
And you did such a great job on the book, New Kind of Diversity. In fact, I was sitting by Mark Cole, and as you taught, the people were on the edge of their seat. They were really leaning in. And I think they're really leaning in because it's such an important message today.
Yeah.
And there is nobody I know more qualified to teach it than you, because you have spent your whole life, even when you were on my team, you were the college pastor, and you've spent your whole life with high school kids and college kids, and you've had a real desire to understand the difference between different generations and how do we bridge those gaps. And I'm so excited about this book. And I just want you to know, I have a copy, and I'm already reading through it right now myself.
Wow. I'm honored. That's so fun. Before I jump into a couple of questions I want to ask you, I feel like I owe my life to you. Your fingerprints are all over me, so you have stock in any person I influence. I'm the Joshua. You're the Moses.
Well, thank you. And I feel like a father to you, and you know that. Yeah. But Tim, when I see you come out with a book like this, it just makes me so proud, because you know what this is? This is multiplication of my mentoring and my influence. Yeah. And of course, you know this subject much better than I do, but one of the beautiful things of mentoring people is that they expand. The mentor gets expanded as far as influence, and you have touched people that I would have never touched and helped them. And so I'm really proud of you, and I'm really proud of the book. It's really a good book. Let me tell you something. You're getting better as a writer. I mean, it's very obvious that you're growing. So I love the book, and the people today loved hearing you talk about diversity.
Well, fun. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So I got a couple of questions. You have said before that you'd like to become a millennial, meaning a next-gen person. Talk about that, and what do you see in the emerging generations? What have you done to kind of learn about?
Well, first of all, I'd like to become a millennial because I'm 75.
Yeah, so, say no more.
Yeah, I mean, I could go back a few decades. Yes. And the number one question I'm asked in the corporate world, and the way they ask the question, Tim, you'll get a kick out of this. The way they ask the question is, they'll raise their hand. Yes. How do I handle millennials?
Yeah.
So the very question tells me they're already negative about the millennials.
That's right.
And what I share with them is very simple. You don't handle anybody until you value them first. And I think the missing link is the fact that we just kind of have to think that our generation is the best generation or the last generation was great. And one of the things I decide, even as an old person, is I'm never going to kind of feel like after I die, everything goes to hell. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I tell in the corporate space, I say, the first thing you do is you just value them.
Yeah.
Because they're going to bring people to the table, really, and ideas to the table that you really need. And, some of my best thinking has been done by others, but my best thinking hasn't been done by others that think like me.
Yeah, right.
It's been done by others who are different than me and are diverse and have different backgrounds, and therefore their perspective is better. And we're just better together. We're better together. Yeah. And I just feel that I would like to be a millennial because my generation didn't put a cause or a mission above the dollar. We basically said, I may do mission someday, but right now, could I have some bucks? Yeah. And when you look at the millennial, and they don't want every 6 month review. They'd really like to have a coach, and they'd like to have somebody that would go along. So when I started studying millennials, and I don't know them near like you, but after I studied and saw some of the great characteristics, I basically said, I think I'm a millennial in heart. So, but what I love about you is there's some people that can say, okay, these are the different groups, different generations, and so we get knowledge. What I like about what you do and what I like about what you do in this book is you tell us not only the differences, but then you tell us how to take those differences and make them a strength in our organization and how those differences are going to add value. So you have answers. Yeah. A lot of times people just kind of expose the issue or the problem, but you say, and let me tell you now how to take these different people and diverse people and really bring them together and have a better team. And so I just love it. You know, when this is a long time ago, well, not a long time, 15 years ago, when Angela Ahrendts was the CEO of Burberry.
Yeah.
She took over an organization and a company that was going down.
Yep.
And she realized old clothes, old people, old thinking.
Yep.
And, you know, all of her board was 50, 60, 70.
Yeah.
And Angela got a board she said, I'm going to get a new board.
Yeah.
And she got a board between 25 and 35, 40, right in that range. And she said, you're going to now be our vision. You're going to help us. And she took the older board members and said, now you're going to be mentors and advisors and, you know, share out of your wisdom and experience. And she turned the company around. But she turned the company around by going to a different generation with different thinking
And empowering them.
and empower them. And look what happened to them. I think it's a great example of.
Yeah, it is. She is perfect. She's the reverse mentoring queen, I think.
Totally.
Well, I really did go after, I like to use the word pracademic. This is research-based, but I do want to offer practical ideas on how to take steps. And I feel like that's what we need to do, particularly with social science. Pracademic. We made up the word, but
I love that. I made up a word the other day too, remarkableize. I said you need to remarkableize things. You
I
need
like
to
that.
pracademic things. See, it's not a word.
yeah.
But can I tell you something? It's going to be a word. Because
It's a concept.
how does
Yeah.
a word become a word? Somebody has to say it.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people all the
true.
time. When they say it's not a word, that doesn't stop you
That's
or me.
right.
Huh? Because it can't be a word until somebody says it and somebody says, I think that's a word.
Yeah.
So, you know, because the people are with us today on this webinar, 2 new potential words. Did you learn? Remember when I wrote my book on teamwork? I had the law of accountability, and
Yes.
publisher said, well, there's no such word as accountability. I said, well, let's not let that stop us.
right.
Let's make it a word. And it's now a word.
It is now.
Huh?
Yeah.
So we're going to have, you know, remarkable license. What was it?
Pracademic.
Pracademic. See,
Yeah.
You're a little smarter than me.
No.
Remarkable
That
license,
is not true.
pracademic.
So this is called a new kind of diversity, and it's about generational diversity. You have a lot of wisdom about just diverse teams, age, gender, race. Talk about what leaders need to understand about diversity to make a team really collaborate rather than collide.
I was talking to a group of major leaders in Latin America about a year ago. And if I took the amount of people that, I suppose there were maybe 30 leaders in the room, it would be no exaggeration to say that those leaders led at least 50 million people.
Wow.
So big boys,
Yeah.
big girls, big leaders. And I asked them, I said, and highly successful in all kind of walks of life. I mean, they were leaders. I had people in their companies, et cetera. Some of them were presidents of countries. I mean, and I said to them, how are you going to now take your potential and just exponentially increase it?
Yeah, yeah.
Because honestly, you're already successful, and you already understand success principles, and you work hard, and you got it all going for you. Yeah. So how are you going to now all of a sudden compound your influence? How are you going to? And the answer is partnerships. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You see, if I know what I know, but I don't include you, and you know what you know, but you don't include me, we become silos. And so I hit my potential. But the moment that I say, hey, Tim, let's work together.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, everybody you influence comes with me, and everybody I influence comes with you. And all of a sudden, we very quickly expanded our level, our size of influence. Does that make sense?
No doubt.
And so what I tell people all the time is when you think of partnerships, when you think of diversity, when you think of different generations, every time you bring people that are different than you, you bring people into your influence that don't even know who you are.
Yeah, it's true.
And all of a sudden they come and they bring their influence, they bring their ideas, they bring their relationships, and you begin to compound yourself greatly. So I have never understood somebody that says, well, you know, you've heard the expression, I'm a self-made man. When everybody tells me, Tim, they're a self-made man, I always look at them and say, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Because if you made everything yourself, you really haven't made that much. I mean, if you're going to climb Mount Everest, you got to have a team.
That's right.
Nobody says, I think I'll get my sneakers on, run up to the top, plant the flag, come down the bar. No, you got to have a team. And I think when you talk about the value of diversity, the value of different generations, of different background, all of that basically says that when you include them, your level of influence, your level of return in life, whatever you're going for, is just going to increase.
Yeah, I so believe that.
I do too.
Well, and we're kind of practicing that. Our
We are.
organizations merging
Oh,
together.
I'm
and-
so excited.
Yeah, I am too.
I'm so excited because we do these values. But I mean, when I think of what you've done with Habitudes, you've been singing the same song. You just have a different choir.
Yeah.
And so when you come alongside of us with the high schools and
Yeah.
and the colleges, you just took us to a whole different level.
Well, and vice versa.
But that's the way. Good partnerships are always win-win. And when you bring in diversity, if it's good partnership, it's always win-win.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, one last question. You've got a new book coming out soon on communication. I can hardly wait to. You and Dan and I had a great talk about it. It was so much fun. So it's the 17 Laws of Communication.
It's the 16, but that's all right.
Is it 16?
Yeah, it was 7. No, it's okay. No. It was
Okay.
it was 17 when we were together.
Oh, okay.
When you and Dan, I remember we spent 4 days and we just had the best time.
Yeah.
And you and Dan both helped me a lot. It was the 17 laws.
Okay.
It was out of our conversations when we holed up and did that.
Decided to merge two of them.
That I merged two of them together. So there are 16. And probably if I'd have spent a few more days with you, we'd have got to 15, 14.
This stinks. This stinks.
After a while, I just say, there's about one thing you need to know about communication. It's a little 10-page leaflet here. Just read
It's a
it.
brochure.
It's a brochure, but enjoy.
Well, okay, seriously, back to the book.
Laws of
So,
communication.
Laws of communication.
16. But who's counting?
That's right. That's right. Communication is paramount with multiple generations, especially. Nuances are easier between two boomers. They're a little tougher with a baby boomer, a Gen Z, a millennial. Talk a little bit about the importance of communication with multiple generations.
Well, first of all, Warren Buffett said if you want to, the most important skill for success, if you want to make a lot of money or whatever you want to do, is communication.
Yeah.
And nothing has ever significantly been done without a great communicator. Someone has to bring people together. Somebody has to cast vision. Somebody has to draw out the ideas from other people, which is all part of this communication part. So people ask me all the time, say, well, how can you communicate to people 50 years younger than you? And the first thing I tell them is I let everybody know that I don't know what they know that are 50 years. So I'm not here to be amazing to them.
Yeah.
But I am here to value them.
Yeah.
And I'm here to do two things, value them, and number two, let them see down the road. My experience and my success, I'm going to offer to them because you can either get your own experience, which is important, or you can learn from someone else's experience. And I think that when I cross over in communication with different generations, when they know that you really value them, and they know that you want to also listen to them, and it's communication's a two-way street, it's not top-down, then they really open up, and I think I have something to offer them. But I've never felt that I have something to offer them and they have nothing to offer me. So I think great communication is valuing people and understanding that it's a two-way street.
I love that. John, I owe so much of my life to you. You have been the mentor for me.
I love you.
I'm going for next generation, but thanks for being a part of this today, and thanks for making this resource valuable and helpful.
I love you, and I'm so glad we get to do it together. Really, you're a very special friend. You're like a son to me. So let's continue to help people. Okay, I'm going to hang around for quite a few years. I hope you can stay with me.
Yeah, I do too. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Love you.
friend.
Yeah.
I love you.
Such an incredible interview, Tim, and thank you and John again for blessing this audience with that content and context. And I love seeing again just the relationship you guys have been able to form and the value we've been able to add to you in this call. So thank you again for tuning in. But we're going to dive a little deeper into the content right now, and this is where I would know, Tim. Let's share a little bit about the book and give this audience a teaser of what's to come and the value that this can provide to them as well as to the teams they lead.
Okay, so listeners, we thought it would be fun, rather than me just give you a lecture or a talk, I'm going to dialogue with you, Chad, and you all can listen in. I'll look at you from time to time. But I wanted to make this a conversation because it really is, this book is a conversation starter. We have old and young working together. We have old and young living together. Sometimes we don't get each other. And you know what I've noticed, Chad? Sometimes we think the goal is just to tolerate
Yeah.
each other, just to endure those millennials or whatever. So let's talk. You and I are different generations.
Yep. Boomer and Gen Xer.
That's right. And John is a boomer, same generation, but he's an early boomer. I'm a late boomer.
Yep.
Not a late bloomer, but a late boomer. Okay, let me just say that.
Clarification is key.
So just in case you're tuning in and you're hearing about this for the very first time, the summary of the book is basically this. The book enables the reader to understand, empathize with, and leverage the strengths of the various generations on your team. So if you're with multiple generations on a team and you have noticed a little conflict instead of collaboration, this book is meant to be that reference guide. So Chad, I think you've noticed this, but there is a bit of a banter and a war on social media right now.
Yes, just a little bit.
Just a little bit,
Just a
yeah.
little bit.
I think it started fun and then became a little bit mean-spirited. So some of the war on social media, the hashtags, about 5 or 6 years ago, we started seeing hashtag how to confuse a millennial. So that was us boomers making fun of those young whippersnappers that didn't know what a payphone was, or whatever, that sort of thing, as if they had to know what that was, But then the millennials started striking back. They did hashtag okay boomer, and that was a big thing. I mean, 3 years ago or so, I remember seeing that all over the place, and much of the accusations were pretty accurate.
Right.
We didn't know what we were doing about some of the young stuff, okay? But then Gen Z got involved. So Generation Z would be younger than the millennials, okay? They're the new professionals now. They're also in high school and middle school. But they did hashtag okay Karen. So you probably heard,
this.
So Karen is that fictitious figure, that mom who's always asking for the manager at the restaurant, to tell them how to run the restaurant, or always intruding on the high school principal, telling him how to run his school. So they were just saying, oh, mom, stop it, that sort of thing. But then Gen Z started doing poking at millennials. And it was hashtag doggo. So you can look that up and see what Gen Z is saying about the millennials, who are only one generation ahead of them. But they still, you're cool, but we're cooler, that sort of thing. And then I thought one in very poor taste started coming out the last 2 years. Millennials and Gen Zers were poking at us boomers with hashtag boomer remover. And it was a reference to COVID-19. It was just terrible.
Oh, gosh.
I know, terrible. But the point is, this tells you, social media reflects what's happening in culture.
Very much so.
There is a thing out there called generational diversity. We don't call it that. We don't know what to do with it except poke fun at each other. And I'm just saying, what could happen if instead of collision, there was collaboration?
Good.
So there is a widening gap. You probably have seen this. There's several at Maxwell Leadership. There's several growing leaders that we got to figure this out. And when we do, isn't it cool? You see strengths in the 20-somethings, 30s, 40-somethings. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but it's amazing to find strengths in all the different generations.
Oh, I love it. It's a unification message is what you're bringing to the table
Yeah, that's
here.
right.
Because if we can understand the differences, but find the commonalities, but understand why we have the differences, that changes everything. The care, the compassion, how we engage. And it's just having those conversations, which I know this book is really going to enlighten us and make us aware of. That's what the GQ assessment does. It's awareness, right? Awareness is so important here.
Yeah, it begins there anyway. So one of the phrases I use in the book is context explains conduct. So if I learn the context of a 20-something, of course you might think that way or vote that way or do that thing. Look at the context. Doesn't mean I agree with everything, but at least I have understanding. That's the number one challenge, I think, of leaders today. I don't even understand these people. But when I do, I can leverage them better. I learn from my own children every time I'm with them, if I let myself. So the most fun part of the book that you keep saying, share that, share that. I put a 2-page chart. It's like a centerfold in the book of just information, but it's 2 full pages of a generational chart where I allow you readers to compare and contrast you with other generations. So should we do part of that chart?
We should.
Okay.
And this is the part that's probably my favorite, but it's also not just my favorite. I've seen you do keynotes on this.
Yeah.
And this is where everybody gets their phones out.
Yeah.
And it's because this chart is the magic of the crux of the books. There's so much more around it, but this is such a critical piece.
I feel like it is too. This chart was more than 20 years in the making. Lots of interviews, lots of research, lots of focus groups. But I feel like I came up with something that helps us understand. Now, keep in mind, it's so easy to stereotype. I know I've said that already. The goal is not to stereotype, but to understand. The goal is not to stereotype, but to understand. Okay, so viewers, if you can see this, on the screen behind me, this black ribbon from left to right lists the 5 generations that still might be in the workforce today. And all of them have names, Chad, for a reason. Okay. There was a reason why social scientists said, these are baby boomers, these are Gen Xers. So let's banter as we go through this. Okay. Real quick, we're just going to take a few minutes, but let's talk about the years that each of these generations were born, because context explains conduct. So the builder generation right behind me would be the oldest generation that might still be working. Their past retirement years, they were born between 1929 and 1945. So they are beyond retirement. They're beyond 65. But here's what's cool. They're healthy enough. They may still want to mow the lawn or do maintenance around the office. They might still be the owner of the company, but they're there, okay? Many of them are still there, and they think very differently than the 20-somethings and 30-somethings. They were called the builder generation, Chad, because look at the years they were born. They built so much out of so little. They were resourceful and frugal, okay? The next generation was the baby boomers. They were called baby boomers because their generation started in 1946, ended in 1964. There was a boom of babies right after World War II. When the soldiers came back, 9 months later, I was a biology major.
That's how that works.
That's right. That's how it works, okay? 76.4 million people were born, and that affected culture because everybody paid attention to us boomers. They wanted our eventual dollar. So books and movies and television programs, and Dr. Benjamin Spock said, don't spank us. We're little people. Let them express themselves. Well, in the 60s, we expressed ourselves. So that was the baby boomers. Next came the baby busters. This is your generation, or Generation X, born between 1965 and 1982. What year were you born?
1978. You just gave away to this whole group of people my age, don't you?
You
see the grays there.
Well, I do, yeah. 1978. So you would be a Gen Xer, but you would be what social scientists call a tweener. If you were born 5 years at the tail end of one generation or 5 years at the beginning of another, you're going to adopt characteristics of both. This is not a science, an exact science, but it is a social science. It helps you understand, just like you can't say all Democrats think alike or all Republicans think alike, but you see a sense. This is what's true about generations. So you would be one of these. Now, you were first called baby busters because the first year of your generation's existence was the public introduction of the birth control pill. So instead of a boom, it was a bust. Okay, yeah. Millennials come next. We've been talking about millennials forever. These are basically the young professionals that were born in the 80s and 90s. Okay, and they were called millennials because they would spend their entire adult life in the new millennium, the 21st century. Okay. And then finally, you have Generation Z following Generation Y, or the millennials. One historian calls them the homelanders because their generation started at about the same time as the Department of Homeland Security. So Gen Zers would only remember the 21st century, more or less. Some social scientists date them slightly earlier in their beginning, but I think the dawn of the new century so much pivoted in our world. So what I thought might be fun to do first, Chad, you and I have talked about this a million times, so please forgive the redundancy.
No, this is great.
But let's talk about the narrative that each generation brings with them as they move into the workforce, okay? I like to say as they move from backpack to briefcase, all right? So for the builder generation, that would be my mom and dad's generation, I gave them the life paradigm, be grateful you have a job. But look at the years. They were grateful they had a job. My dad is a perfect example. He just passed away at 90 in 2020. Wow. But the first decade of his life was the Great Depression. And then the next 5 years were World War II. So that was a day of resourcefulness and patriotism and frugality. Be frugal. Save that rubber band and plastic bag. We'll need it next year, Save the wrapping paper at Christmas. We'll use it next year. We'll retape it, Oh my gosh, my mom and dad. My mom, I love my mom. I miss her to this day. She would we'd use our napkins at dinner time. She'd hang the napkins on the clothesline. We'd use them the next meal because they weren't that dirty.
Oh, I mean, that's it was my
Your
grandparents.
Yeah.
And the same thing. I mean, just so frugal in everything. They kept everything.
I miss that generation. And I love that gratitude, Something funny. My dad, clear into the 21st century, said, be grateful you got a job. I said, Dad, I started the company. Just be grateful you got that job. Okay. So the baby boomers come next. Some of you watching must be baby boomers like me. I gave us a life paradigm. I deserve better. And there was a bit of entitlement back in the 50s and 60s, only because we felt we deserved a better life than mom and dad had. It was not a time of depression, but expansion. Xers come next. This is your generation. I gave you all the life paradigm. Keep it real.
Keep it real.
Okay,
Yep.
you were an authentic generation that was unplugged, and don't tag us as anything. But the years you were growing up, at least your generation, Vietnam War, Watergate, the OPEC gas crisis was going on. We were waiting in lines at the gas station, and the gas prices were high. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yep.
History cycles through. I love what Mark Twain said. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And there's a rhyme right now back to those
That's
hard
good.
times back then.
That's
yeah.
good.
So keep it real. Millennials, I gave you all, if you're on the line now, I gave you all the life paradigm. Life is a cafeteria because you grew up in a time where there was digital customization. So cell phones, computers. So my two kids are an example of this. You know Jonathan. You helped mentor Jonathan.
Yep.
So he's 30 years old right now. Both of my kids stopped buying compact discs to get their music years ago. Why would they buy a CD? There might be several songs I don't even like, but I get one song at a time. I'm for my own playlist, mixing and matching like a cafeteria. Educational decisions this way. Many young millennials would go to 3 or 4 different colleges for one degree. And faith is like this too. I've noticed this across the country, from New York to California. A little bit of Jesus, a little bit of Confucius, a little bit of Oprah, a little bit of Buddha, and they've mixed and matched.
Gosh.
Yeah, there's no one truth source, but I've figured out what fits me. It's like a buffet.
Gosh.
So anyway, and by the way, I hope that doesn't sound derogatory, but we're a free agent.
Yep.
We're a free agent now. There's loyalty. Well, many millennials would say, the company wasn't loyal to me. Why should I be loyal to them? So that's the feeling.
I imagine you guys online, the light bulb's coming on when you're hearing this, because it is for me, and I've heard this a few times.
Yeah,
But this content, as you look through this, you're looking through the lens of your life, and it's good awareness for people.
Yeah,
to
that's
plug into.
minimally. It's just gives us understanding.
Yep.
I love looking at this as a dad,
Yeah.
because my daughter will make some decisions I wouldn't have made, and Pam and I will go, what? And then I remember the book.
Yep.
It's a reference book for me.
That's right.
For me. And I go, oh yeah, I wrote that. But anyway, the last one I want to go through real quick is Generation Z. Many of you who are workers or employers would go, I don't understand those recent graduates today. I feel like after the focus groups I've done with middle school, high school, college students, and young professionals, the best phrase I would attach to them would be this one: I'm coping and hoping. So they're hopeful because they're young, but this is a very difficult time to be a new professional.
It is.
There's a volatile economy. Who knows if it's going to be a recession or inflation? We don't know. Is the job going to be available, or do I need to do a gig or a side hustle because it may go away? So just know, if nothing else, we need to have empathy for Gen Z, because it's just
It's so true.
a weird day.
So true.
Yeah. So now, one thing I want to, you've heard me talk about this, but I want to hear you comment. If you look across there, you almost see a pendulum on a grandfather clock swinging back and forth. The builder generation was a generation of caution.
Yep.
The boomers, a generation of confidence.
Yep.
Gen X, back to caution. Millennials, back to confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And Gen Z, back to caution. So there, even in 10, 15 years, there might be a sway going on, even with young people. And we got to stop saying kids today. Kids today.
Yeah.
You're going to feel different, but there's different for a different reason. Yeah.
Well, and I married a millennial.
Okay.
So I have in my own home the combination of those.
You got 3 generations in your house.
Yeah, so I do with my kids too. So
Yeah.
and that's, I see the pendulum swinging.
Yeah.
And how I even filter
Yeah,
life
that's right.
versus how my wife filters.
Yeah,
life.
right. That's true.
It's-
You've told me that
Yes,
before.
it's a big difference,
Yeah.
but this is so enlightening for me to have that context again. To
One of the reasons that happens is because parents certainly affect how we're raised, but culture seeps in quicker than it did 100 years ago. 100 years ago, you had a family, the parents were the number one influence on the boys and girls outside of Uncle Fred and Aunt Minnie, But today, we got a smart device. I'm getting affected by culture as a 15-year-old. And Lord knows, Mom knows about my Instagram account. She has no idea I have 5 Finsta accounts, fake Instagram, where I've got personas I've developed about who I am. And welcome to the world of today.
It
So,
is very different.
okay, I know we need to
Yep,
stop
yep,
lecturing,
so-
but
yep.
let me do a couple of others
Yep,
real
yeah,
quick.
hit 'em.
I think this is fun. Many of you are leaders watching, and many of you are parents who are leading a home. Let's talk about attitude toward authority, because kids today have far more agency and audacity than maybe 90 years ago. So the builder generation, their view of authority was respect them. For we baby boomers, it was replace them. My generation just decided to take over, and we did. And you're waiting for us to leave the earth now. For the Gen Xers, it was endure them. I think your generation said, man, we got to put up with these boneheads. Let's go get a Starbucks. For millennials, it's choose them, because remember, they see life as a cafeteria. So I will talk to college, or I did a decade ago, talk to college students that would say, well, yeah, I have him as a professor, but he's not my mentor. And what they meant by that was, I have to take his class. I'm choosing the people that I let coach me. But I'm telling you, Chad, for the Gen Zers, because they've grown up with a smartphone and they really don't need adults to get information right now, I think if they were honest with us, they would say about authority, not sure I need them. I don't know if I need you, boss. Now, they do need you, but you're going to get a feel sometimes like
you don't.
What do you, I got the badge on. I don't care. I got a smartphone, and I've Googled you. In fact, I'll talk to college students, and I've noticed they're looking down at their phone. I think they might be on social media. No, they're fact checking me in the audience as I'm teaching, Okay, one more that's really fun, and then we'll stop and we can banter a little bit more. I love talking about this, and if you're in a business right now, this will be very, very relevant for you. The market. What is the market of consumers that each generation represents as they become the chief buyer, as they're in a full-time job and they're buying and selling, okay? So back in time, let's go to the builders. The builder generation introduced goods into the economy. We talk about selling goods today. Before builders, it was commodities. At dinner time, you might have grown your meal in the garden, okay? Or killed the fatted calf or whatever. For these builder generation kids, as they became the adults, if it was birthday time for their children, for the first time, they could go to the store and get a Betty Crocker cake mix. Instant cake mixes were introduced in the late 30s and 40s. And so it was powder. You add 2 eggs and water and stir. So that was a good, okay? It was a processed commodity. Baby boomers come along, and the boomers introduced the service economy. Now we buy and sell services as much as goods. In fact, in America, manufacturing's been shipped out to other countries, but we're selling. I will pay for a service. Wash my car for me. Change the oil in my car. My dad still turns over in his grave that I pay somebody to change the oil in my car.
For you.
Why don't you do that yourself?
Do it yourself.
That's right. My dad could take a car apart and put it back together. I'm telling you. Okay, so at birthday time, a boomer growing up, mom now had the opportunity and the predisposition to go to Baskin Robbins or a bakery and get a cake served up to her by a professional. Your name is scribbled in icing. It's served up by a professional, but we pay for services, okay? Your generation comes along, Chad, and I believe you introduced to the economy the experience economy. It's as if your generation as buyers said, goods are not enough, services are not enough. I want an experience when I buy something. So I like to joke, but it's true. We all go to Starbucks for an experience. I would not pay that much money for a paper cup of coffee unless I walk in, the feel, the look, the fragrance, the smells, everything. I'm buying an experience.
The Gen Xers are keeping Starbucks in business, is what you're saying.
I think so. And Disney. You will take your kids to Disney.
That's right.
It's a 5 sensory experience.
That's right.
Okay, you get it. So okay, let's go back to birthday time. Your generation might have gone to Chuck E. Cheese because
100%.
I'm telling you, the birthday cake is not enough.
No, let's put some entertainment around.
That's right. A mouse, tokens, pizza,
Absolutely.
games.
Love Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah,
the only problem is that the germs that you came with, I don't know, it wasn't always the greatest.
Don't go to Chuck E. Cheese.
That's right.
During COVID.
I don't take my kids there.
No way. Or else you have wipes.
That's
okay.
right.
So get this. Experience economy led the way to the millennials, which I call now the transformation economy. And I made this prediction. I'm not a prophet, but I made this prediction between 10 and 15 years ago. As millennials become the parent, and they are now, they would in essence want more for their child. Goods are not enough. Services are not enough. Experiences aren't even enough. I want an experience that transforms us in the process. So birthday time, I started predicting years ago, might be an even bigger production where a group comes over, puts up a set and puts on a educational experience that changes our life, a spiritual experience, a mathematical, a science experience. And I'm telling you, Chad, 10 minutes from my home, there's a billboard where there's a company that comes in a limo. Lord knows what it costs. And they're putting on this experience. But you get what I'm saying, don't you? Can you hear this now? with every generation, expectations go up. I'll pay more, but I expect more.
Yep.
Pastors, you better provide an experience that transforms them. Employers, you better provide an experience that transforms them.
Right.
Now, the good news is it's doable, but we got to think differently than we did even 10, 20 years ago. So one last box.
Yep.
For Generation Z, this is a prediction because they're just now becoming the adults.
So young, yep.
But we are now in the sharing economy where I think their mindset is, I consume and create. I'm buying and selling all the time. So I might be a YouTube influencer. I might have created an app and I'm a millionaire at 25, that sort of thing. So think about it, consuming and creating. The sharing economy is now a very different world. The largest hotel company in the world owns no hotels, Airbnb. The largest taxi service in the world owns no cars, Uber, Lyft. It's weird. So Gen Z would say, I don't need to own things. I share things. I buy things. And, and it's just a different world. And I got to stop, but I'm just saying,
So good.
this is one reason we've got to understand the consumers and the creators in our generation, because we have different mindsets.
So good. And if I mentioned take pictures, so if you are taking a picture right now, one thing I'll ask you to do is if you post to social media to share it to the world, tag at Tim Elmore, tag at Maxwell Leadership, and tag at John C. Maxwell.
Yeah.
And we'd love
Yeah.
to repost some of you guys and
Yeah.
get this out there to the masses. And thanks for sharing if you do that as well. So appreciate it. But this is so enlightening.
Well, it's part of a chart. There's a bigger chart
Yep.
that I really think
That's in
becomes
the
a
book, right?
conversation starter.
And
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
appetizer to the main meal. But you have to get the book to get the full course 2-page spread that you put in there. That even takes this a step deeper. And obviously the book's going to break down all of this in a application mindset of, hey, now that I got this insight, this know-how, understanding, now I can go take the GQ assessment and actually test out a little bit better because I know people a little bit better.
Yeah.
But now let me go apply it. And that's I know so much of what the book.
Well, and I have a chapter on the builders and the boomers and the Xers. So
Taking each one
you
individually.
literally can just say, this is an encyclopedia. I'm going to go chapter 7. I need to learn more about those Gen Z kids. So I feel like that's, but Chad, I love to show a photograph. So I'll stop lecturing now, but I love this photograph. My question for all of you viewing is, do you feel the gap? Do you feel the disconnect between generations? This is a classic multi-generation photograph right behind us. So anyway, we'll stop there.
I may have had that haircut at one point
that's
in my
right. You
life.
probably
So I
did.
may have.
Yeah.
I may have been guilty of it. So incredible insights. And again, we're going to jump into the next part of this webinar. But thank you, Tim, for this. Thank you for writing the book. Again, team, everyone viewing online, newdiversitybook.com. Newdiversitybook.com. It's where you can get all the value add. Check the assessment out, the keynote, as well as purchase the book through your own retail outlets. We also have it on our cart here through Maxwell Leadership. And so excited to share that with you guys.
We live in a world struggling to understand itself. Differences everywhere appear to drive us further apart. But when we learn to communicate, diversity becomes our greatest strength. We become much more powerful together than we ever could be apart. And now, with 5 generations in the workforce, those differences offer you 2 options. Allow the gaps between the generations to hold you back, or use their strengths to your competitive advantage. Introducing A New Kind of Diversity, your guidebook for leveraging generational dynamics in the workplace. Dr. Tim Elmore has led the country's conversation on generational diversity for more than 3 decades. Tim offers insights to help combat loneliness in the workplace, improve communication, revenue, and team morale, and bring clarity around team values and priorities. Pick up your copy of A New Kind of Diversity today.
Well, Tim, I know you and I both are incredibly excited about this next special guest that may be almost a household name to some of you tuning in. Many of you on this call today are actually family and part of our community. But for those that aren't, you're in for a treat. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about her perspective on this book, A New Kind of Diversity, and the content of it. And so we're excited to welcome to this call Valerie Burton. Let's put some in the chats here, some hand claps, and welcome Valerie to the call. Valerie, good to see you. Good to see you today.
Oh, it's good
Thanks
to
for joining
see you,
us.
Chad. And congratulations, Tim, on such a needed topic. I have not seen a book tackling this subject in this way, so I'm really excited. about
You're
what
kind.
people are
Thank
going to
you.
learn and how they're going to be able to use it.
Well, we're truly honored to have you. For those that don't know who is on this call and who Valerie Burton is, you should, and you will after this, I promise. But she's named one of the top 60 motivational speakers in America. She's the top 100 thought leaders in the field of personal development and leadership. Featured on shows you all know, Today Show, the Oprah Magazine, the Dr. Oz Show, Essence, NPR, Los Angeles Times, and the list goes on and on and on. Valerie, again, thank you for being here. I know Tim has some questions that are burning in his heart to share with you and get some of your wisdom and insight. And I know as well as all of our community turning in online right now, they are excited to hear from you too. So Tim, thanks for inviting her on with your influence and
Absolutely.
having her be a part of this time together.
Valerie, I'm honored that you spent some time with us. Thank you. You are a stellar
Thanks for the
individual.
invitation. I'm
Yeah.
glad to be a part of the conversation.
Good. Well, I want to ask you some Gen X questions, okay? So you're
All
an
right.
extraordinary person, but you are a member, I shouldn't say but, and you're a member of Generation X. So we were even talking beforehand, you felt like your generation was kind of sandwiched in, kind of in the shadow of the boomers. So your generation, maybe not you, but your generation grew up a little more skeptical. The times were a little bit more darker with Watergate and Vietnam and others. And so your generation grew up in the shadow of those baby boomers that were gigantic. And so I want to ask you, when did it hit you that you have something to offer, that you could be an extraordinary individual and not just be in the shadows of another generation before you? What would you say?
As we were coming into adulthood, I didn't really have those thoughts so much. Like, I don't think of myself as part of the Vietnam era or anything like that, because I was born in 73. So, it was like wrapping up. But my dad
Yes.
served in the military and came in during that time. I really think more of like the Berlin Wall coming down. I think
Yeah.
of the 80s were a good time to grow up. But I
Yeah.
was a latchkey kid. I did have that piece of yarn with the key on it around my neck under my sweater so nobody could see it, with
Yeah,
both
yeah.
my parents working. So I think when I really noticed the generational difference, which I think happens for all generations, is, early 20s when people start realizing, oh, this new generation is adult. And I had gotten out of grad school and I was in the marketing department at an accounting firm, and I would read the Dallas Business Journal. And one day they had this article about how we were all slackers, this Gen X. And I hated
Yeah.
the title because they labeled us X because I guess we were just generic. So they didn't even
Yeah.
give us a name. And so I wrote a letter
Yeah.
to the editor. And I was like, the first president I remember was a peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia. And,
Yeah.
I don't even know all the stuff you guys are talking about, but we're not slackers and we're reading your newspaper. So, maybe you could consider not insulting us all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was actually, I found an awakening, for some boomers. I got an invitation from the editor-in-chief to start writing a column because they realized, hey, we're not listening to these voices.
Yeah.
So I think it happens with every generation. And as that generation starts to speak up and their voice is heard, people begin, I guess, maybe giving them a bit more respect and start trying to learn, who are they? Because, I think every generation gets called a slacker or there's something wrong with them, right?
No, you're exactly right. In fact, let me volley back. Dating clear back to Socrates. Socrates thought kids in his day were disrespectful to their parents. And I thought, oh my gosh, he could have written this last week, But you're right. I'm so glad you said what you did. The X generation, Generation X, wanted to be called X because they didn't want to be tagged with anything. Don't call me a this or that or the other. And so you're exactly right. But you had to prove that you weren't those slackers like those older journalists said you were. And you weren't going to fit into the stereotypes that we had. And I'm thrilled that you brought that up because even though you're part of that demographic, you had to break out of a stereotype, which we hate. So.
And I'm an Xer along with you, Valerie. So everything you just said resonates big time. So I'm with you.
So I'm a baby boomer being surrounded by Xers. Is
You
that what
are,
you're
that's
saying?
exactly
You're
right.
overwhelming me now?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so Valerie, I got another question. So you have become an expert on culture and specifically humility and resiliency, which are two incredible competencies that you want in any organization. I think those are powerful for any generation. Would you
Yeah.
talk about why they are so important to Gen Z, millennials, Xers, and boomers all together?
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of empathy for, I feel like boomers really had to be resilient. When I look at how my
Yeah.
parents grew up and the changes that happen in their
Yeah.
time. I mean, my dad grew up in segregated schools. My mother helped integrate a school, which was not a pleasant experience. I didn't have any of that experience. And then I look at millennials and Gen Z and, coming along when, the school shootings started happening and September
Yeah.
11th and the recession, I feel like my generation is the last one that had these opportunities to just do better than our parents in a fairly simple fashion. So the resiliency, I think, is more needed than ever. And I think some of these younger generations have just learned it by virtue of the things that were happening as they were growing up. But with the cultural humility, which is a psychological term around not assuming that you understand people who
Yeah.
have a different experience than you do.
Yeah.
And so having the humility to really listen, to ask questions, to not be judgmental. A lot of times we talk about cultural competence, which is assuming that, we don't want to call it stereotyping, but this generation does this. And so I know all about them. But instead, looking at people as individuals and knowing there are generalities, but let me really hear the heart of what people are saying and what their frustrations are and what their hopes are, and have the humility to know that, maybe there are some experiences I can't quite understand, but I
Yeah.
can listen
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
can try to understand. And that's where you start opening up that communication
No doubt.
and coming to this place where you can actually collaborate and get things done together and have respect for one another.
Yeah. I think you're right. That's what every generation in the workforce is wanting. Old from young and young from old. So the last question I want to ask you, I really look forward to asking this question of you. I want you to talk to us as Coach Valerie Burton, okay? So you've been coaching consistently for years and you're extraordinary. I want you to talk about coaching as it relates to different generations. What tips would you have to coaching millennials, coaching Xers, coaching boomers? Do you change anything up? I love the concept of listening and respecting. That's just never going to go away. But talk about being a coach to the multiple generations and what makes coaching effective from your point of view.
Well, first of all, thank you, Tim. I love coaching, and coaching is really helping people move from where they are to where they
Yeah.
want to be and to be able to navigate those challenges along the way. And one of the most important principles that makes coaching work is getting to have clarity about where you're wanting to go,
Yeah.
right? So if you're working in an environment with multiple generations, the question is, what is your vision for working together? What is it
Yeah.
that you want to see happen that isn't happening right now or hasn't been happening? That's the first question. When you can all agree on that, then the question becomes, well, what's getting in our way?
Mm.
And what are our options for moving around that?
Yeah.
And how could I show up in a way that makes this easier for everyone? And so if, for example, you're a baby boomer, you could step back and go, yeah, I might feel like, this younger person is not as respectful or they don't want to pay their dues.
Yeah.
But then get curious. Well, I wonder where that comes from. Or I wonder
Yeah.
if it's possible that I am interpreting something in a way that I see it in my generation that they really aren't intending it. And if
Yeah.
you're in a younger generation, same thing, right? You can make the assumption based on what someone older has said that they mean something they don't mean. But what
Yeah.
if you give people the benefit of the doubt? Most of the time, people do deserve that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying every person. We all know those people that,
Yeah.
you're spot on. But I would say most people, especially in a work situation, aren't trying
Yeah.
to make things worse and ultimately don't want to go to work and be stressed out and frustrated and not like their coworkers. So people are coping as best they can. And if you really approach it from that perspective, you can start asking the kinds of questions that I just asked that really open you up to seeing things differently. And you become a leader in that situation who's able to help move the ball forward and overcome some of those challenges.
I think you're spot on. And I love that general counsel to any generation. It's going to come back to that. So, Valerie, thank you so much for your insight in this time together. Appreciate it.
Oh, I loved it. I could keep going. This subject is so good. I hope
believe
people
it.
just grab onto it and really ask themselves, what is my role in my workplace
Yeah.
to bridge the gap between these generations? We're
Yes.
all in it, trying to move in that same direction. How can
Yeah.
we do it better together?
Yeah. Love it.
Valerie, you're the ultimate coach. You're the ultimate gift to all of us and our community online. I see so many people chiming in with some aha moments and comments that I know they're going to take and apply. So thank you again for carving out today to be a part on such a special day. I know for your good friend Tim and book launch day. And thank you for prioritizing this and making it possible. You're such a gift. And we look forward to doing more together. We may take you up. If you can talk on this all day, we may take you up on that. And so be careful what you offer. Be careful what you offer.
That's funny. I
Thank
look
you again,
forward to
Valerie.
it. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
You bet.
Introducing A New Kind of Diversity, your guidebook for leveraging generational dynamics in the workplace. Dr. Tim Elmore has led the country's conversation on generational diversity for more than 3 decades. Pick up your copy of A New Kind of Diversity today.
All right, guys, we are at that point in the webinar where we get to interact with some Q&A with you, Tim. So I'm excited about this. Many of you have already been putting some questions in the chat, and my team has been texting me those. So my phone's been going off, and I'm excited to dive into a few of these. The first one actually comes from Jake in Chicago, and he's a 21-year-old student in college.
Okay.
And he's entering the workforce recently, and he's trying to actually now learn how to influence and lead up.
Yeah.
What does
so
that
not
look
by
like?
position.
Not from position,
Yeah.
but how do I lead up and influence up?
Yeah. You know, I think the rules that govern that have not changed. I remember when I was 23, John Maxwell was my boss. Was he better than me? Yeah. Was he smarter than me? Yeah. Was he a better position? Yeah. But here's what I learned. One, work ethic is a love language of your boss. If you show I'm willing to come in, do the work, maybe stay late. I know that's not politically correct, but to come in early, stay late. I remember having an intern saying, "Can I get a key?" And I thought, that's pretty arrogant. You want a key to the building? Well, I want to get her early. Oh, here's the key. You know, so that would be one thing. Another, I think when you have ideas, and you will have ideas as a 21-year-old that are not being done by the boomers and Xers in charge, share it with humility. Share it with respect. I know that's something you want as well, 21-year-old. But I'm telling you, whenever I had ideas for John, if I was humble and said, "Listen, I know you got a great thing going here. This might be," that humility was, "Oh, of course, yeah, let's talk about this." So humility and respect are just gigantic. And then I would say, learn the love language of your boss. For John, for my boss early on, it was save me time. If I would write a chapter or write a lesson or do something for him, he'd write a thank you note back, handwritten every time. I still got a bunch of them. You just saved me 9.5 hours of my time. And I knew that was his way of saying, thanks for loving me. I love you too. So learn what speaks to them. And if you'll do that, if you'll add value in the way they need or want to have, you'll have a key to the building and more. So I'll stop there.
No, that's incredible too. And this one comes from, because we're going to rapid fire here, please keep sending them in the chat. So team's texting me as we go in real time. So please keep dropping those in the chat. But I got one. This one's coming from Dwayne in DC. What are the key questions leaders need to ask to be better at closing the generation gap that we talked about?
Good question. One that I suggest in the New Kind of Diversity book, which I'm sure you're going to be getting soon. I'm kidding. No, I'm not kidding.
No,
I'm
you're
not
not.
kidding. I want you to get it. I hope it's a reference guide for things like this. I put this in the chapter. One, I think we need to ask those younger generation workers, what's your superpower? Okay. And that's just a fun way of saying, where do you bring strengths? It may be something to do with smart technology or creating apps or whatever, but ask them that question. I think secondly, what can I do that would make you feel empowered? Even if you can't do everything they say, you just learned what their trigger is, And it may be leave me alone, give me autonomy. It may be give me a lot of feedback daily. A lot of times the data shows, I shouldn't say a lot, in a nationwide survey of Generation Z, the workers said, I want full access to my boss and I'd like feedback on a daily basis. Well, most bosses would go, really? Seriously? Yeah. So
That's good.
almost like I'm playing a video game. I want lots of feedback on that.
in real time. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let me see. I think another one would be this builds a bridge. If you're asking them questions so they get heard and you're listening. So I often say to bosses, the older folks, this is the leg you have to stand on, LEG. Listen, that makes them feel heard. Empathize, that makes them feel understood. And then guide. Now you've earned the right to guide them.
Oh, say that again, Tim. Say that
Okay,
again.
listen, which makes them feel heard. Empathize, which makes them feel understood. Now I've earned the right to guide. And when I guide, they go, yes.
That's good.
So it's really just good human relationship. Doesn't that work with spouses? Yes. Our children? Yes. So that'd be
So
what I
good.
would recommend.
That's incredible. I know everybody's taking notes down there. Thanks for putting that in the chat too. I know we'll get that in the chat of what he just said on leg as well. But this one comes from Los Angeles. Preston in Los Angeles says, is the generation you are from the leading factor in how you think?
Oh, wow. Good question. So my answer would be not always. For some that are completely saturated into culture or whatever, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and I spend 8 hours a day on that, it might be. But I would be the first to admit, and I do in the book, there's other factors that are just as strong and maybe stronger. The parents who raised you, okay? Family of origin, personality, tragic things that have happened that might have given you PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So there are a lot of other factors. So I would say, no, it's not always the leading factor, but it's definitely a factor that I like to call it the elephant in the room, the one we don't talk about, and the one we need to be talking about because there's so much we could glean from each other if we just get it out there in the open. So,
Good.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Very helpful. Well, this one comes from Carolina in Germany. So put in the chat your emoji flag in there if you're international.
go.
If you're international, we want to see how much of an audience we have from all over the globe because I know we have that today. Please put that in there. So we love our international tribe. What are some of the most common things that create discord between generations in the workplace? I think that's a big one.
Yeah, it is. So this may relate to your home. I'm imagining that some of you are listening and your parents. And so with one ear, you're listening as a professional. With the other ear, you're listening as a parent. I know you've even told me sometimes I'm doing that. I am too. I've got 2 adult children, but they're millennials, and I'm different. I love them to pieces, but I have to acknowledge we're a little different. So here would be one. If I insist on my own way, that's just going to cause them oftentimes to dig their heels in. Not all the time, but I think we need to meet in the middle. So when they come into the workplace, it's not a classroom, it's a workroom. So we need to call them up to the majors, right? But at the same time, I need to be able to communicate. I want to come your way on this. So maybe we do text message more often, or maybe we do post some items on Instagram instead of just our Slack, team group communication. So that would be one. Another one would be when I don't show respect, I'm going to have a difficult time on young and old. I tell the story of Janet and Rory, who Janet was the hiring manager. She hired Rory. He's now 23, been on the job 1 year. They had a team meeting, Chad, and as Janet's sharing the strategies for the next quarter, he chuckles, kind of lacking respect. May I say that? And I don't think he meant to, but it's just he's chuckling at these stupid ideas. And of course, Janet goes, am I missing something, Roy? Is something funny? He goes, well, I think what we're doing is pretty chuggy. Well, Janet didn't know what chuggy meant, but she knew it was derogatory. So she lets the meeting go, but she's put off. So after the meeting, she asked Roy to come to her office, and they have a meeting, short and sweet. Well, no, short and sour, I should say.
Yeah.
So Janet goes, you just disrespected me. You dissed me. You questioned my authority in front of the whole department. And he said, I feel like you dissed me. You didn't listen. You said this was a learning organization. You said you're open to new ideas, but he didn't know how to share the ideas. So I think we've got to make sure that respect is universal and will not go away. I cannot imagine a time when showing respect to another generation doesn't go a long way. If my young team members have this wingnut, foul-tip, bonehead idea, but they share it with respect, I'm going to go, well, let's think about it, because of the way it was shared. You can say almost anything if you say it well, if you say it in the right way. And then one last thing. I believe that humility is just a magic wand. We do not live in a humble world right now. But if you remember, Chad, last year I released a book called The 8 Paradoxes. And the first paradox of the book of leadership is I should be confident and humble. Now, often those don't go together, but think about it. When I speak, I want to be confident. I think we get heard when we're confident. But at the same time, I want to be humble, which I think causes people to realize, okay, he doesn't think he knows everything if he's humble. So let me give you my assignment that I gave me this year. When I speak, I want to speak as if I believe I'm right. But when I listen, I want to listen as if I believe I'm wrong. When I do that to a 20-something, when I do that to my own kids, they go, seriously, Dad? You're an author and you're listening to me? It just goes a long way.
So good. So good. So much great insight here, guys. Let's see here. Just a couple more, because I know we're going to run out of time here, which I wish we get to all these questions that are coming in. This one says, actually, it's a John Maxwell fan, so this is good one. John Maxwell has said, before that managers treat everyone the same and leaders treat everyone differently.
Yeah.
Tell me about this idea. So they've read some of your stuff, I think, too, Tim. Chess versus checkers in leadership, and how that plays into the way leaders should treat others. And this comes from Jody from Toronto, Canada, our international crowd again.
Cool. Yay. So if you're not familiar with chess and checkers, let me just explain. We love to teach next generation leaders through images. We think pictures beat lectures every day. And pictures are worth 1,000 words. So one of our images that we teach is called chess and checkers. The bottom line very quickly is when I play the game of checkers, all my pieces look alike, move alike, I treat them all alike. When I play the game of chess, I have to know what each piece can do. A knight does this, and a rook does this, and a pawn does this, and a bishop does this, and a queen does this. So I believe good leaders play chess, not checkers with their people. I find out who's in front of me, and I learn how to lead them best to get to the goal. So even my own 2 kids, 2 children born out of the same womb, eating the same green beans under the same roof, very different. So I disciplined my children differently based on who they were. And I remember one time Bethany came to me and said, Dad, you're treating Jonathan differently than me. I said, Bethany, remember chess and checkers? And she goes, yeah, he's different. And yes, he is. You mentored that kid.
That's right.
So I would just say, I think this might be a good time for a story, Chad. I know we're short on time. But one of my favorite stories of a leader that played chess was at a quick service restaurant. So it's a fast food restaurant. Great brand that we all know. But Maggie was the hiring manager. She interviews Antonio. He seems to be a good worker. He has some experience, seems to be committed to really coming in and doing the work. So she goes through all of the questions, then she shares all the policies and hires him. Well, a few weeks into the job, Antonio's there. Maggie happens to be on the shift and notices a gigantic tattoo on his right arm. Well, one of the policies at this particular restaurant, right or wrong, no tattoos. We just feel like that's off-putting to some older customers. We want to look clean and sharp, and so no tattoos. Well, he went through the interview and didn't say anything. So you can tell Maggie's a little upset. So she calls Antonio back to her office, and this is where the rubber hit the road. She said, you weren't honest with me. You have that tattoo and you shouldn't have that tattoo and be on the team here. Well, he got completely offended because that tattoo as a 20-something was part of his identity, at least the way he saw it. Yeah. I mean, that tattoo, the piercing, as you well know, numerous, young professionals have them. It's part of their identity. So he felt like she was questioning his very identity. So they met 3 times and didn't make a lot of headway. But the 4th time, breakthrough. And here's why there was. Maggie led well. They met together alone in the back office, and she said, Antonio, I got to be honest with you. I can't just let this tattoo slide because everybody else has followed the policy. And if I let you go, I'm going to have all kinds of questioning of the policy, and we're going to be in trouble with corporate. However, she said, you're a great worker. I don't want to lose you on the team. You're such a team leader already after just a few months. So let's make a deal. We're going to get in front of the whole team and talk this through in front of them. And the deal I want to make is we're going to keep you as a great worker, but you're going to wear a long sleeve shirt and you're going to cover that tattoo. I know you're proud of it, but while you're here during this shift, you're committing, and I need you to apologize, if you can do it sincerely, that you weren't honest up front. And he did it, and she did it. The team gave him a standing ovation. I think that was chess, not checkers. If she had a different kind of person and he's not cooperative or not, she would have gone, bye-bye. Yep. He was worth keeping. And so she flexed without completely giving in. And then she called corporate and said, could we rethink this tattoo policy? Maybe we need to rethink this.
Yeah.
So,
which is a great way to lead up to from her position and what she's experiencing from the field too, which is great.
Absolutely.
So, gosh, what an incredible story. So, all right, we'll wrap with this. We got so many coming in, but we're gonna leave it at this one. I think it's a good one to wrap on. So, this is Dylan from Houston, Texas. How does one get the most out of this new kind of diversity book? We've been talking about the book. You'll get it.
Well, thanks for asking. I'm very proud of it. I'm excited. It's not the end-all book, but I tell you what, I mentioned this already. I want it to be an encyclopedia, like a book you have on the shelf that you could refer to, chapter 7 or 3 or 8. If you need to figure out this generation or that population or this group, or why did this question get asked, or what's this DE&I feeling that I've got on my team? Well, here's the generational look. So that would be one. Read it for sure and use it as a reference guide. But I'd like to encourage you, this may sound horrible, but please forgive me, get a copy for everybody on the team. Let them have their own reference guide, because the young are going to need to understand the old, and the old are going to need to understand the young. And then have a lunch and learn. Make this a discussion topic. We did this on our team, and I did this, but we're talking, we got Gen Z, millennials, we're laughing together at each other, and we're laughing at ourselves, and I go, I know I do that, don't I? Yeah. So I'm poking fun at me, and they realize, okay, if you did that, I can do that. So I try to be a guide dog, not a guard dog. I'm not protecting, I'm partnering. I'm going first. So think bigger maybe than you're thinking. Get a copy, yes. Get a case maybe. And maybe make it a group study where you're talking and processing. And now we can talk about ethnic, gender, income diversity, and generational diversity. And it's not a weird elephant in the room.
It's very good. And you'll see, on this screen, the tagline of the book is making the different generations on your team a competitive advantage. This is a book that's really designed for team.
Yeah,
just
it really
like
is.
Tim said, to have this as a book study with your team, take them through it together, will be so applicable to this specific book. And that's not always the case. A lot of books are more for personal growth consumption, but this is for personal growth with a team, which I think is so important to narrow on. So, and you guys know the site. We put the link in there. I'll say it one more time, but newdiversitybook.com, newdiversitybook.com. You can get the GQ assessment on there. You can also get access to a new kind of diversity keynote that you're going to do by buying the book. And then you can buy it through all the retailers, including our Maxwell Leadership Cart as well. So thank you again, Tim, for an incredible Q&A. Wasn't that so great? Let's put a little applause emoji in there again. So thank you, Tim. I really appreciate that.
It was fun. It was fun.
We live in a world struggling to understand itself. Differences everywhere appear to drive us further apart. But when we learn to communicate, diversity becomes our greatest strength. We become much more powerful together than we ever could be apart. And now, with 5 generations in the workforce, those differences offer you 2 options. Allow the gaps between the generations to hold you back, or use their strengths to your competitive advantage. Introducing A New Kind of Diversity, your guidebook for leveraging generational dynamics in the workplace. Dr. Tim Elmore has led the country's conversation on generational diversity for more than 3 decades. Tim offers insights to help combat loneliness in the workplace, improve communication, revenue, and team morale, and bring clarity around team values and priorities. Pick up your copy of A New Kind of Diversity today.
We truly hope that this webinar accomplished what we set out to do, which is truly to add value to you as a leader. There's so much in here. I know for me, taking notes on this, I have a lot to go back and process through and to apply. But I want everybody in the chat right now, please, can you give the hand applause emoji or a heart emoji? I love Dr. Tim Elmore may be in the chat, and thank him for his time and for bringing to us some incredible special guests that I know are dear friends of yours. And so please get this for yourself, get it for others on your team, take people through a study. It is the kind of book that will have legacy impact on you and your leadership and your future. So thank you, Tim, truly, on behalf of myself, John Maxwell, Mark Cole, Maxwell Leadership, this entire community, for adding tremendous value to us today and for getting and birthing this book out to the world. Again, you can go to newdiversitybook.com. That's newdiversitybook.com to pick up your copy today. Get one for your team, your leaders, and we know it's going to add tremendous value. Thank you again for being a part of today's webinar. We love you, we value you, we appreciate you, and we will see you again very soon.